worked in museum education in various ways for a little over 10 years now, and a lot of that time has been leading tours myself, teaching other people how to lead tours, doing a lot of professional development about talking to lots of different museum audiences of all ages and abilities. I currently work with a range of people who are interacting with our visitors in varying levels of formality. So I'm excited to be able to share a little bit of that experience with you all today. I have also presented at a bunch of different conferences over the years and attended a bunch of other conference sessions. So I feel like I am happy to kind of share impressions from the conference going time that I've spent in my career as well. So I can give you a little bit of an outline for what my hope is in the next little less than an hour. I am gonna kind of go through some sections of this, but there are gonna be parts of it where I'm hoping to get some of your contributions and ideas. So yes, as Veronica said, there will be a time for questions at the end, so please do make note of any questions you may have. I'm also hoping that we have a little bit of time if some of you are working through ideas. I know especially with some of these shorter format sessions, you may still be working out how best to present them. And so if you'd like to ask any specific questions about your topic, or if you'd like to gather some wisdom from the group, I'm hoping we have a little bit of time for that at the end as well. The other thing is, if you are joining on the computer, Zoom has a chat function. So if you move your mouse probably towards the bottom of the screen, a control panel will pop up, and if you click on the little chat button, hopefully you'll get a chat window, and you are then able to send either a message to an individual person or to everyone. And so I do have a few questions that I'm going to ask to try and get some feedback from you in the chat. So if you're able to open up that chat window, now would be a good time. And for those of you on the phone, I'm going to read out anything that comes into the chat window so that you will hopefully be able to hear it. So I am in the middle. I've got one little example of a short format session that I myself have presented. It's a little video to play. And then we're going to talk about some kind of general tips and things to keep in mind as you head into AAM. I imagine some of you are probably presenting for the first time, and some of you are longtime conference presenting pros. So hopefully there are some good, useful tips, no matter what. So I'm jumping right in with questions that I am hoping to get your answers for in the chat. So my first question is, what is your top reason for proposing your session in the first place? Let's take a minute or two, and if you can type that answer into the chat. Nobody is feeling brave. Oh, good. Here we go. There's some. Okay, so one person has said to share new information relevant to the field. One person has said to oh wait, it scrolled down automatically. To see more collections-focused topics at AAM. Someone else is wanting to share what they've learned. Someone else is presenting because they wanted to get funding from their employer to be able to attend. That is real. Props to you. Good job. Somebody else has said we're doing something interesting and want to share with the field. Someone else said we have a model we're excited to share. There's another one to share something we feel would be helpful to others. This is such an altruistic group. Furthering the professional in a collaborative way. I think our work with employing immigrants in the museum can be replicated by others. To generate a viable dialogue, share information and experiences, wanting to highlight accessibility in museums, wanting to share more about diversity and teens in museums because this work still needs to be more visible, to get feedback on our programming, to share the great work we're doing with the youth. So I feel like this is so lovely. You're all such sharers, which is wonderful, and I think this is a really lovely example of the variety of reasons that people might be wanting to present at a conference in the first place, right? And all of them are probably resonating with everybody, even if it's not the thing that you typed. So then the flip side of that is, though, now thinking about the fact that you are doing either a burst or a case study, this kind of shorter format, idea, what is something that makes you the most anxious when you think about leading a conference session? So type that in the chat. We'll read them out. So one person has said, it's my first time leading a session. Somebody else has said they're presenting solo for the first time. Getting to all of the information in the time frame that you have allotted. Someone else saying we will feel rushed. Somebody else being worried about stumbling on your words. Lack of time in the short format. Creating an engaging dialogue with participants. Not having enough time to get through everything I have to share. Doing a presentation or a lecture that is not interactive. Cramming too much into the time frame. Providing necessary context for our work and our project. How to balance providing information with audience participation. That the information is not new compared to what others are doing, applying this information to other organizations. Time limits, getting info shared in a timely fashion. Another one on timing. Another one saying explaining details in a short amount of time. Needing to get through a lot of background information to make the topic relevant. I haven't been to a burst yet, so I'm not sure what's allowed and the setup of the room. One person says public speaking, and someone else said being the focus of attention and making sure we are presenting valuable information. And then one more, being comprehensive in the time frame. So again, I think a lot of overlap, and hopefully part of why I wanted to share this is to highlight that a lot of people are having these same both reasons for wanting to present and what they're excited about, as well as these same anxieties. And I feel like, again, hopefully, even if you didn't necessarily type any of these particular answers, hopefully some of them are resonating with how you're feeling, both in terms of the excitement and also the anxiety. And that's all real. You know, it's a national conference, it's a big stage. You don't know how many people are going to be in the room, and you want to be presenting these things that are relevant and making the most of your time. So that's all really helpful and good. And I feel like you're all in, hopefully feeling you're in similar boats. I certainly feel similarly to all of this when I'm presenting at conferences. So in thinking about how you can make the most of these short formats and address some of these anxieties and be able to share what you want to share, I have another question that I want to put out for you, which is to think of a time that you attended someone else's presentation. And my little asterisk here is that this could be at a conference, or it could be in your day-to-day work life. It could be in a meeting, it could be in a program, it could be in a professional development workshop that you were at. It doesn't necessarily just have to be at a conference. But think of a time that you attended someone else's presentation and put in the chat one thing that sticks in your mind the most that you remember from that presentation. Which I suppose could be a positive thing or a negative thing that you remember most. So we have kind of a combination of that showing up in the chat. So one person said a personal story was really memorable. One person said the title had nothing to do with what they discussed. One person remembers the passion and the enthusiasm, the speaker's confidence, the fact that they were giving actionable advice, feeling bored when the presenter read off their PowerPoint. So this is great. We have some positive and some negative memories, right? Let's see, clear, concise recommendations on how to go about doing the work they were talking about. Time for Q&A. Connecting with the audience using humor, sharing the good and the bad. A nice synergy between what was on screen and what the speaker said, which was a nice balance and complementary to each other. Too much on a slide in small point type. This is good. We've got some good memories and bad memories that hopefully everybody will also resonate with. Yellow background with white text on a PowerPoint. No one could read it. Yep, we're going to get to some accessibility tips too. Lots of buzzwords, but not a breakdown of the terminology and a clear connection to practice. Yeah, these are great. Bad PowerPoints. Yes, we'll do a call out for bad PowerPoints. You will notice that I try very hard in my PowerPoints to be pretty minimal, high contrast, etc. We will talk about PowerPoint a little bit in here too. So I think that's really notable that people are readily recalling both things that were really great and things that were really not so great, right? That, not to put the pressure on, but you can be quite memorable for good reasons or quite memorable for bad reasons. So hopefully at the end of our time together today, we'll be a little more on the track of the good reasons to be memorable. Great, this is very helpful. It's like a good little temperature taking from the room here. So what I am going to do next is I am actually going to play, it's like a 5-minute video, and I'm going to turn on the captions. If you're on the phone, hopefully this will still make some sense from an audio point of view, but I'm also going to give a little bit of a synopsis at the end. Basically what this video is an Ignite presentation that I did, which is one of the kind of short formats where your slides automatically advance. You have a limited number of slides. It's 20 slides and they're each only up for 15 seconds. So this is an Ignite presentation that I did at the Museum Computer Network Conference in 2017. And at that conference, the Ignite evening is a series of these sessions, and they kick off the conference. It's like the first gathering of the conference before the official program has even begun. It's the night before at a bar. And this Ignite was literally the first Ignite of the entire conference. So I was the first of the series of Ignite presenters. And I want to play this for you as an example of what you can do creatively with a short format session, even if this isn't exactly the format you want to use. And hopefully talk a little bit afterwards about kind of what my goals were and what I hope it achieved. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And hopefully this will play and I can turn on my captions. Oops, sorry. Just kidding. I'm going to start that again. Oh, hang on 1 second. I am pausing. Veronica is giving me a good cue that there is no sound coming through. That won't help you. My audio is on. Let me see if I can actually just watch this from the internet. Maybe that will work better. And if this doesn't work, then we can just share it with you afterwards and I can talk you through it. Okay, it seems like you guys are not getting the sound from this. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead of continuing to try to make this work, what I'm going to do is kind of give you a little bit of a description of what I did. I will leave it on a little still, but I'm going to leave this paused. See, we're being flexible and going with the flow. So basically what I did was that it's a 5-minute presentation where it was called Fail Fast, Fail Furious, Pittsburgh Drift. The conference was in Pittsburgh. So it was my little nod to making jokes. And so what I did was kind of tackling this idea that people talk about failing fast and failing furious, that we sort of borrowed from the tech industry. And now I think a lot of people are kind of rolling their eyes and stepping back from, which I think is a good idea. And what I wanted to do was sort of try and show people that it is still worth it to try things. You don't necessarily need to do the, kind of fail fast, fail furious approach. But the idea that I was trying to get across was that you can try things not knowing that they will succeed when the stakes are pretty low, and that is fine, and that you will have a support network to help you out. And so I think that's always a good thing to keep in mind, even though it is a national conference that you may be presenting at, that you are also in a room of other people who are feeling similarly to you, just as you all said in some similar things in the chat. So this Ignite presentation was literally me getting the entire room of people in this bar in Pittsburgh to do rapid fire participatory exercises, 15 seconds at a time. So I set it up where I would chime a bell. Oh, Veronica has just, thank you, Veronica, for putting the link to this presentation into the chat. And I will share it at the end as well. So if you want to watch it later, you can. So I in essence, kind of used a couple of sources that I like, kind of outside sources of inspiration. So in this case, I was looking at Oblique Strategies, which is something that Brian Eno created to kind of help musicians and creative practitioners that he was working with kind of come up with new ideas when they were stuck. And so Oblique Strategies was one source of inspiration, and the other one that I used was the Space Deck. Actually, I have it. I'm sitting at my desk right here. It is a little deck of cards that was made at Museum Camp, which was run out of the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. And this was a deck of cards that was designed for making space for different kinds of interactions. So I used those sources of inspiration to create these little rapid fire participatory experiences. So in this video, I will chime a bell in between each one, and then I ask people to take a selfie, and then I ask them to give something that they have on them to a friend, and then I ask them to turn an everyday movement into a little dance and do a dance for 15 seconds. And then I ask them to just breathe in and out for 15 seconds. And I ask them to, I ask for a suggestion from the audience, and somebody says, act like a cat. So then we all act like cats for 15 seconds. And it was just really sort of uncertain whether everyone would do this, right? I feel like not everybody in that room certainly did all of these things. Some of them failed by that metric. But I think my larger point was it was really like the stakes were really pretty low. I mean, yes, I was on stage, and of course I was nervous about it, but people really were kind of gung-ho to try. And even if not every person did everything, that didn't mean like it all needed to feel like a complete failure. So even if bits of things are not exactly successful, it is still worth trying. And then I also wanted to call out the importance of finding outside sources of inspiration. You don't need to come up with all of these brand new ideas for reinventing the wheel and being super creative in all of your presentations without talking to other people or relying on inspiration from other sources. So I encourage you to watch it later if you want, but we don't need to further use up our time. So in thinking about these short format sessions, whether you're doing a burst or a case study, whether you have figured out the actual format you want to use or not, which you may not have, these are a few things to keep in mind no matter what. So right now I've got a slide up with 4 points for getting started. So the first one is brevity is the soul of short format sessions. And I think this is totally highlighted by the fact that a number of you said you were worried about getting all of your information out in the amount of time that you have, right? I highly recommend, it's like an edit process, right? You have to be ready to kill your darlings. You may have this one little anecdote that you really love, but if it's not essential to getting across your point and you're worried about time, maybe this is the time to let that anecdote go, right? If you give a great session, I'm sure you're going to have people who want to talk to you about it in the hallway afterwards. You may have a chance to share your anecdote there. But it really should be about the people in the room more than it is about you as the person presenting, right? You want to give them a good experience. That's what makes for those good memories that people can take away. And so if you are worrying about your time, be pretty ruthless with editing. One other thing that I like to do with this is, even if you're not ready to do a practice run through of your full session, share it with a colleague or a friend or a family member who is not connected to your presentation and who will be able to give you some feedback as though they were a person attending this session. And maybe they say, you know, oh, I didn't feel like that anecdote really connected with me. And then take that to heart, right? Even if you love the anecdote, if somebody who doesn't know your program or your case study doesn't connect with it as well, maybe it's a sign that it's time to save that one for a sidebar conversation afterwards, right? So really being kind of ruthless about how much you are trying to present in the short amount of time that you have. The second thing that I have on this slide is play with your format, right? So just because you are doing a shorter format doesn't mean it needs to be a lecture, right? Some of you may indeed be lecturing, that's fine. Some of you may have a PowerPoint presentation that's relatively straightforward, totally fair. But then some of you also mentioned you were trying to get engagement from the audience, and some of you mentioned remembering humor, or how can you get this dialogue going. And in a short format, that is worth thinking about, right? So do you want to play with your format? So I have done, I did a half-hour conference session once that was formatted like a Family Feud game. So I came with more information than I was planning to share. And we let people from the audience in teams kind of choose which categories they wanted to hear from, right? We didn't get to all of the categories, and that was fine. That's what helped keep it to half an hour. Let's see, similarly, I did one that was a choose your own adventure kind of a style where, you know, I offered people, you know, I would share something and then at the end of it, they would have two choices of what they wanted to hear more about, one or the other. And we went down the path that the people in the room were interested in. So again, you know, I was ready to share all of those things, and I know that you all have wonderful things to share. But if there is a format that will help you keep your amount of information kind of curtailed to the short amount of time that you have, think about using the creativity of the format as a way to help kind of limit your how much content you're trying to include. So then I feel like I'm giving you an example today of my third bullet, which is prepare, then be prepared to improvise, right? So I've been preparing this presentation. Veronica and I tested out Zoom. We thought everything was going to work. And then I tried to play you a video and you weren't getting any audio from it. So I had to improvise, right? I was thinking that 5 minutes was just going to be you watching a video, and instead I needed to roll with the punches and be prepared to describe that video to you instead and offer you a link to watch it later, right? So I think that's something, the idea of improvising may sound quite nerve-wracking, but I think it actually becomes more feasible if you do more preparation. So if you're able to run through your presentation ahead of time, if you are able to review your slides with somebody else who is not involved in the presentation, right? All of these things will help you feel like you really know it, so that if a curveball is thrown at you, like my video didn't play today, you're able to kind of roll with the punches and move on. I think that's also, I will say, as a little bit of an addition, that's also something that actually makes your audience sometimes feel more invested, is to see you as a human being, right? If you're a robot who is reading off a script, like somebody said at the beginning, you know, somebody reading like a script from their PowerPoint, that's not very interesting to listen to. And it's not going to help your audience feel connected with you. And it's not going to help them remember all the valuable things that you do have to share. So that preparation is important, but you don't want to memorize it like a script, right? I don't have a script. I have bullet points here, and I have my little speaker notes in front of me of the things that I want to share with you, but I hope you can tell I'm not reading off of the script, right? And it feels a little bit more human. And so if there's a moment where you do need to improvise in a session, don't be afraid to tell people aloud that that's what you're doing, like I just did with the video, right? Being explicit about your flexibility as a human being is often something that will actually help people kind of feel more invested in what you have to say, because they relate to that. Everybody has been in that situation. And then the last thing on this slide is timekeeping is key. And a number of you were worried about the time. So after you have ruthlessly killed your darlings and after you have found a format that will help you manage your time, you definitely need to set up a way to be aware of time. And especially in these short formats, right? If you want to do any formats where the slides automatically advance, you need to have a real sense of how long each slide is going to be up. If you are doing, like a case study, many of the case studies are 2 30-minute case studies that are put together into a 1-hour session. So in that case, you are timekeeping not only for yourself, but also for the presenters of the other case study in that hour, right? So it's really, everybody kind of needs to be on board with their timekeeping and do whatever you need to do, right? If you are somebody that needs to wear a watch, like I wear a watch still, which I think is increasingly rare as I see my younger colleagues coming up. But I wear a watch because when I'm leading a tour in the museum, I don't want to have to pull out my phone to see what time it is, right? I want to have a sense where I can just look down at my wrist and say like, oh, I've got about 15 more minutes. If that helps you, do that. If you want to set your phone on vibrate in your pocket so that you get some haptic responses to tell you, do whatever you need to do. If you want to set up extra timers on the table in front of you. And I know that the AAM team is also going to be helping out with that. But timekeeping is really, really important, always, but especially in the short format sessions. So we're going to come to talking about the Q&A aspect of these short format things too, but I just wanted to mention that in passing here, because if you do want to do a Q&A, that's part of what needs to be built into your timekeeping as well, right? So if you're doing a 30-minute case study, that's not 30 minutes plus Q&A. That's 30 minutes including the Q&A. And my general rule of thumb is if you are getting into your presentation and you're starting to break down the units of time into, okay, and then we'll do 5 minutes for this, and then we'll have 15 minutes for this, and then we'll have 7 minutes for this, and then we'll have 5 minutes for this. Just be aware that while that may help give you a sense, it's not going to go exactly like that. It never goes exactly like that in the room. So again, in paying attention to your timing, if you have planned a 10-minute Q&A at the end and you realize, oh no, I've gone a little bit longer, or someone asked a question before the Q&A time, think about being okay shortening that Q&A, right? So that you still stay within your allotted time. Okay, I'm gonna move on to my next slide, which is getting into slides and specifically accessibility about slides. So first of all, I will point out, you don't have to use slides. I think lots of people rely on them, but I dare you to try and go without them, right? If you don't use slides, it tends to help people in the room stay more present and focused on what you're sharing and the content, especially if you're trying to do anything that gets them engaged or sharing their own stories. I think sometimes slides can be something that draws everyone's attention. They feel like they need to take photos of them or record everything on them or live tweet them. And that is not always going to encourage people to actually pay attention to what you do have to share that's really valuable for them. So definitely think about going without them. Don't take them as a given. That said, if you do want to use slides, a couple of key points for the accessibility of those slides, right? Because a number of you had very memorable experiences of tiny font and slides that were impossible. Number one, a large, easily readable font, right? So it's not the time to use your kind of fancy cursive fonts that are hard to read. And it's certainly not time to squeeze the font size down, right? You want something that is large and that is easily readable. You also want to keep high contrast on your slides, right? And that's for people of all levels of vision, right? Like high contrast is much more easily visible, even if you've got perfect 20/20 vision. But if you do have low vision or any kind of visual impairment, the high contrast really helps because visual impairments is not, it's not a kind of you either see or you don't see anything. There's a huge spectrum. So for many people, if there's a really high contrast, they are able to see, even if they may be considered legally blind or they may have a number of visual impairments. High contrast will still let a lot of people be able to see what you have to share. So if you can do black and white, that's best. So I have kept these slides in pretty large font and they're in black and white. Black text on white background is the default. I know people like to make their slides look pretty, and I am one of those people. So if there are ways that you can find to do that that don't mess up your contrast, go for it. But definitely that's another place where I would recommend sacrificing the visual design for the clear legibility. And then the third point that I have on this slide is to have minimal text, right? So you don't need to put all of the text on the slide. You don't need to be saying exactly what's on the slide. The slide should really just be kind of cueing you for the highlights of what you want to share. And especially if you're going to play with your format or try to do something that isn't just a sort of lecture PowerPoint style, having less text on the slide will, I think, help you feel like you're more comfortable and able to share without needing to stick to the script that might be on the slide. So my next tip is general accessibility. So my first one is 3 words, and I have the claps in there to emphasize them. Describe your slides, right? This is something that a lot of people forget, and I would actually say I see many more people not doing this than people who do this. So you may have people in the room who are, and there are people who are registered for the conference who are not seeing at all, have low vision. Maybe it's just someone in the back who's sitting behind somebody tall, right? Not everybody is going to be able to see your slides for any number of reasons. So it's really important to describe them. Here is another tip for another push for keeping your slides simple. If you have text on your slides and you're using it the way I'm kind of using these slides as quick talking point bullets, then what you're saying is really expressing the content of your slides. If you have images on your slides, describe what those images are, right? So I don't actually have any images in this presentation, partly because I didn't want to be relying on that. But if I were to put up an image of a slide, so for example, the video that I was playing, if I had just included a still image from that, and I wasn't trying to play a video for you, I would have put that slide up and said, so what you're seeing on this slide is an image of me from about the waist up, standing in front of a podium with a laptop on it. I'm wearing a red t-shirt that says museums are not neutral, and I have a black blazer on over that, and I am a white woman with curly hair that has streaks of color in it. And that's fine, right? You don't need to get into a ton of editorializing content when you're describing images on your slides and when you're describing images in general. The best rule of thumb is just to be sort of as factual as you can, right? To give people a visual grounding in what that image contains. Similar to somebody with full sight who may be able to see it, they don't necessarily know what that image means or where it's coming from until you talk about it. But the idea is you're describing it to give everybody kind of an even playing field for having that in their mind. So that is tip 1 on describe your slides. And I should say, vision loss at some point in your life, that is by far the most common physical disability in the United States. There are some statistics that it's like almost a third of people at some point in their life will experience some form of vision loss. So keep that in mind, that people in the room will probably be in varying states of visual abilities. Then the other thing that I have, the other tip on this slide, which is 3 more words with the claps, is use the microphone, right? So similarly, you may have people with hearing loss in your room, right? The microphones are not just there for convenience, they are sometimes essential ways to share what you are saying. So I know lots of people say like, oh no, I can just be loud, or I'll use my teacher voice. Don't do it. Your teacher voice or your loud voice is still not going to help if somebody is using a hearing aid, for example, or is listening through another assistive listening technology. So that is the same for the presenters. Use your microphones. And if you have any Q&A, that's why it's really important to wait for a microphone to be passed around or to ask people to come up to speak at a microphone. Okay, and speaking of that Q&A, we'll go on to my next thing. So how to manage your Q&A is really important. So first of all, you don't have to have one. But assuming that you do have one, if what you want is questions, remind people that what you want is questions, right? I think we've probably all been in a Q&A where someone got up to the microphone and their question was actually just a comment, right? So as I was preparing this and talking with Veronica, her tip was a question ends in a question mark, right? And that is up to you. I think that's often something that I appreciate when a moderator of a Q&A will state explicitly at the beginning. We are really hoping to use this time for people who have questions about what we have just shared. If you have a comment, feel free to come and chat with me out in the hallway after the session, right? You can give people that option if they want to share things with you, or if you share your contact information, they can email you or call you. But if you want questions, remind them that that's what you want. And if people are offering up comments, even if you have said you want questions, feel free to step in with a little gentle, hopefully kind of humorous as possible reminder of like, oh, you know what? That one sounds a little bit like a comment. Let's talk about that outside afterwards, right? It doesn't need to be about calling them out and embarrassing them, but I think everyone else in the room will appreciate the reminder. So second point on this slide, again, make sure everybody uses the microphone for the same reasons that I was talking about before. The other thing that I want to say is just to remember that you're still holding the reins. And that's kind of the metaphor that I think of. Like, you can hold the reins, if you're riding a horse, you can hold the reins loosely. If you want to have Q&A where you open it up to the room, you can hold those reins loosely and give people the time to ask their questions, but that you're still holding the reins. So if somebody is kind of rambling on or talking their way into figuring out their question, or you see that time is running really short because you're being really good and mindful of your timekeeping, then you can step in and say, you know, it sounds like maybe you have a question that you haven't quite figured out. Why don't we talk about that in the hallway outside the session? But I want to make sure that there's still time in the room for anybody else who might have a question. And again, it may feel like that is stepping a little bit outside your comfort zone, or it may feel like that's confrontational, but it doesn't really come across that way. And I think everybody else in the room really does appreciate a moderator who is willing to remind people that the reins are still in your hands, so don't be shy. And then my last point on this slide is that Q&A doesn't have to happen at the end or happen at all, right? I think a lot of people, again, similar to how we think about using slides in presentations, you don't have to use them. Similarly, you don't have to have a Q&A. Or you could have a Q&A in an alternative format where you have people write things on cards and send them up to you during the presentation, right? But there isn't any time where everybody else gets to the microphone. Or you could have a time where you're inviting questions during the presentation. You want to make sure you get them a microphone when they ask, but you don't have to wait till just the end of the Q&A to do that. So I do want to, as we think about Q&A and discussion, I also want to give a shout out to the AAM Code of Conduct. And so what I've put on this slide, and this is more text than you should have on a slide, frankly. Shame on me, I'm slapping my own wrist. And these are selections from the full Code of Conduct. So at the end of this presentation, I have a link to the full Code of Conduct for the annual meeting, because it's got some really good reminders in very clear language. But I do want to read just kind of the key initial part of it, which is that this is now a quote, "The American Alliance of Museums is dedicated to providing a safe, inclusive, and welcoming conference experience for everyone. We do not tolerate discrimination or harassment in any form. Discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of others based on human difference. Harassment includes, but is not limited to, Now I'm going to step back out of my quotes here. And what I have included is just some selections that may come up in a kind of in-session dialogue. There are more examples on the full code of conduct, but things like comments or actions that are minimizing a person's lived experiences, identity, or safety, right? Like that is something that there really should not be any room for in a session, right? Or the idea of somebody who is disrupting you over and over again, or sustaining a disruption, or intimidating any of you who are speaking. None of you should have to put up with that, and nobody at the conference should have to put up with that. And so AAM is really dedicated to making that a safe, inclusive, and welcoming experience for everyone, right? The other thing that I wanted to make sure to highlight in here, and again, the full text is in the code of conduct on the website, is that discrimination or harassment is not discussion of sensitive topics, communicating in a tone that you don't find congenial, criticizing racist, sexist, classist, cis-sexist, or otherwise oppressive behaviors or assumptions, reasonable communication of boundaries. So for example, in my example I said before, if somebody is asking you a question that isn't really a question, it is a comment, and you don't feel like it is leading anywhere, or it is eating up time that you feel is precious and dwindling, and you say, you know, reasonably and politely, you know, it sounds like this isn't really a productive use of the time that we do have together. Let's move on to the next person. If somebody responds to that by continuing to demand the time on the microphone, you have been perfectly within your rights to politely and reasonably say that you don't want to discuss that with them. So that's the sort of thing where, yes, AAM is dedicated to that, but I also want to kind of empower you to feel like you can use that code of conduct as a little bit of a I don't know, justification or a reasonable kind of backing for you holding on to the reins in your session. So that is my spiel for now. We have a little bit of time left, and I think Veronica's got a little bit of housekeeping at the end. But here is the moment where I do want to make sure that if you have things that you're thinking about your session or wondering about your session or questions about things that I have brought up here, this is the moment to cover them. So if you would like to put a question into the chat, you definitely can. You can either type into the chat publicly so it goes to everyone, or if you would like, you're welcome to chat just to me privately. And I think in a minute, Veronica can come back and unmute the folks who are on the phone. But this is sort of your moment to ask questions that you've got. Oh, wait, we have one in the chat. Let me start out with that right there. You're on the ball. So this is a question that says, for case studies, will we know in advance what the partner case study is or what the other theme is? I think that's actually... Yeah, a Veronica question.
Yeah, I can. So if you go over to the full program in the annual meeting microsite or annual meeting website, you can actually see what session is in your room. And you'll also see that your, most sessions are an hour long. If you see that yours is 30 minutes, and this applies to both burst and case studies, that's an indicator that you're a case study. You can also look at it by room. So when you log into the presenter center, down in the bottom, we tell you what room you're speaking in. You could also do a search by room. And if you still can't find it, let me or Tiffany know, and we will send you over our handy dandy visual spreadsheet that tells you what else is in your room. There are some folks who are scheduled who we didn't have either a paired session has dropped, and so you might wind up being a solo case study or burst that's not paired with anything. But just to point out, it doesn't mean that you then get an hour for your session. You still have 30 minutes. And a question to me of, can we post a link to the presenter center here in the comments? Yes, I will get that to you while Rachel asks or answers some additional questions. I will put that in there.
And then there's another question, which is also a Veronica question, but it's come into the chat. A couple of logistical questions about the session. For instance, the capacity of my room. Do you know where I can access that information?
Sure. So it's not available online for you to view. It truly depends on the room that we put you in. And so what I can give you is a general number to guide you with. And if you are, you want to know exactly, Tiffany and I can also tell you the max capacity specifically for your room, but a general guidance. The minimum that the rooms can hold is about 125 people at our smallest room. At our largest room, it's about 350, 400 people. Now, that doesn't mean that that's how many people that you're going to get, but at the most, you could potentially have 400, and at the minimum, you could have 5 people, even though the room is set for that many. We don't require people to sign up for sessions in advance, although you can get a general sense of people that are interested in your session. Again, if you view the schedule on the website, it shows you how many people have liked it. And we're doing some additional promotion about the itinerary builder that is essentially what people will use to add sessions to their itineraries in the next couple of weeks. So you'll see people add sessions to their calendars, and therefore the count will go up there. So I hope that that generally answers the question, although I can't specifically say you are in room blah, 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 and that means you're going to get 300 people. I can do that offline if you need me to.
And I will also say, oh, that good point. So I'm just going to repeat. So that same person who asked that question was saying, thanks, this is useful. I'm considering having an exit handout and want to plan accordingly. And I think that's definitely something that is worth thinking about is how do you want to plan given that you don't know exactly how many people will come? And so I don't know that I have specific guidelines of numbers of like how many copies of the handout should you have, or how are you going to do XYZ strategy that you might be planning to do for engagement. But I would just think in your planning about what some contingencies might be. So if you're planning for an engagement strategy that would be ideal with 25 people, but then 200 show up, you might need to improvise in the moment and change your plans, right? Especially if you've got a short amount of time. And thinking about some plan A, plan B, plan C in your preparation will help. If it's something like a handout, if you want to make a certain number of copies and then keep the master, and if there are way more people, you could either offer to scan it and upload it so that people could access it online, or you could go and make extra copies at the copy center, which every convention center has one. So just thinking about what those plan B, plan C options are in advance is usually helpful.
And Rachel, just to piggyback on that, just so that you all know, our mobile app is really great in that once you upload your presentation to the Presenter Center and AAM makes it live on or around May 17th, you know, when the mobile app officially launches and people can see the handouts, we can attach handouts in the mobile app as well. So somebody who navigates over to your session would be reading your session bio, and then they would see, oh, here's the slides and here's the handout for that person's session. So that's another option, and that's available to attendees after. Even if you don't have enough copies available on site, you can always refer them back to the mobile app, assuming that you have come to the Presenter Center and given us that handout and slides to upload.
So that, nobody else has put any other questions in the chat. I don't know if we have people on the phone who might have questions.
Yes, give me 1 second. I will get my admin stuff together and see all of our folks. All right. So folks on the phone, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read out the area code to your phone number there, and I will then unmute your line and ask if you have a question. And if you do, go ahead and ask it. If you don't, just let me know, and I will go back to muting you, and then I will carry on to the next person. So I'm going to start as a New Yorker, and I'm going to go with the 917 area code first, just to see if you have any questions. All right, you're unmuted. Do you have any questions? 917-886. Okay, I'm gonna put you back on mute. I'm gonna go over to area code 813-228. Hi there, do you have any questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Great. All right, area code 713-249 is next. Any questions? Very quiet crowd today. All right. And it doesn't, oh, I think one more person on the phone, another area code 713-249. Hopefully, sorry if it's you in there twice, so I'll unmute you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, doesn't look like we have anything from the phone.
Great. And then we had one more technical question come up in the chat. We have will we just need HDMI adapters for Mac, etc.?
Yeah, so if you haven't listened to the speaker logistics webinar yet, definitely go ahead and do that. If you are planning on using or bringing your Mac, send Tiffany a note so that we can make sure that our AV team is set up, and especially for you Mac users, please bring your dongles. I know that there are lots of different types, and want to make sure that we have what you need to get your stuff together. Just a note on your presentations. The reason why we have you upload them to the Presenter Center is that Tiffany and I can look through and make sure that they meet our accessibility standards. We can also ask you any questions of formatting if we have a question about them, or if we see that you're using a format that we're not familiar with. And then the other thing is that your presentation is pushed from the speaker ready room directly to the computer in your room. So you would not be under any circumstances bringing your thumb drive to the room to bring up your presentation. The only exception to that is folks who are using a Mac and have told us ahead of time, hey, I'm going to run this from my Mac. And we had that situation with a couple of the interactive sessions who have some game shows or custom programming that they've done. And so we're going to use their computers directly. So Matt, just go ahead and email Tiffany and we'll take care of you on the Mac question.
So there are a couple more questions that have come into the chat. One of them just came to me privately. So, but it sounds like a logistical question, which is there a limit on the number of presenters allowed on stage? E.g., we have 3 presenters and 1 coordinator. Is the coordinator allowed on stage with the presenters for a total of 4?
I couldn't bring my video back on. I'm both smiling and laughing because although we have tried to say no more than X number of people, almost every single session is different and has a wide variety of number of people. No one's going to police you at the door. The only thing that makes it challenging for us is just figuring out how many chairs fit on the stage ahead of time. And so to me, it's completely up to you if you want the coordinator up on the stage or not. What is their involvement as it relates to the case study? Is it keeping time for you? Is it handling the Q&A for you? Is that something that they could do from the podium, or do you need them to be sitting with you on stage? And so the follow-up to that is just send Tiffany a note and let her know what you would like to do, and we will make it happen.
And I would say my one thing to add to that is in line with the kind of kill your darlings, edit ruthlessness about keeping a control on how much content you're trying to share in a short amount of time. Think about whether you need all 4 of those different people sharing, or whether 3 of them sharing is enough and you want to have the coordinator just sit in the front row and get a shout out from the people on stage, right? You could handle that in a number of different ways. And then we do have one more question here, which is, what are your tips for those of us nervous about not reading from a script, but want to make sure the presentation is engaging and you don't forget anything? I feel like this is probably like everybody's #1 anxiety about public speaking, right? I do think practicing is really helpful. And I do think having a set of bullet points is really helpful. So that doesn't have to be a script, but that's, if you want to write out bullet points that are kind of most of sentences. So for example, one thing that I do when I'm leading a tour in a museum is I create a sort of lesson plan outline for myself that is, it looks very much like, I think, that kind of standard outline that we have all seen / had to make in English classes in high school, right? That it has kind of like, here is my thesis statement. Here are the bullet points underneath, right? And that is not something that I bring with me when I go on the tour. And it's not something that I memorize word for word. But that helps me kind of have a sense of like, okay, here's the key point that I know I want to hit. Here underneath that are the 3 things, like a question that I want to ask people or an activity that I want to do with people to help me remember. So you can obviously have notes. I think most people have notes when you're at conferences. So there's certainly nothing against that. So I definitely would recommend, you know, having whatever kind of notes are going to make you feel more comfortable, but to think about maybe formatting those notes as bullet points rather than full sentences written out. And if it'll help you feel more comfortable to practice it in advance so that it feels a little more fluid to say, practice it with colleagues or friends or family. And, you know, you can get some good feedback sometimes from them as well, but hopefully it will make you feel at least like the words are more familiar in your mouth that way. And then I would also just remember kind of like general, if you're feeling nervous on stage, general things like have a bottle of water nearby. You can take a sip if your throat gets dry, or take a breath if you're feeling like your throat is, like everything is kind of like choking up in your throat. Take a breath or swallow. You can say into the microphone in a room, like, just give me a minute, I'm gonna take a sip of water. Nobody's gonna hold that against you or think that you're in any way unprofessional for needing to take a drink of water when you have been speaking on a public stage. So again, I think it's like there's a certain amount of humanizing. Nobody is gonna expect you to be a robot. And in fact, I think people will be able to kind of go with you and focus more sometimes if you acknowledge some of those explicitly.
And the only thing I was going to add to that is Tiffany and I are also available should you want to practice with us as well. Sitting across me, I've voluntold her also. So I know it's 12:30. Oh, it just ticked to 12:31, and so I have taken up more of your time. These slides I'm going to share with Veronica, and so this can all be available in the Presenter Center for you. But these are just a few resources. So one is a guide to Ignite talks, and that's just kind of like there's some videos and there's some guides to how you might want to format and prepare for a format like that if you've got automatically advancing slides. One is just the TED website, which is, I think, a really interesting place to see people who are doing a very different format of shorter sessions, right? So they're like 5 to 25 minutes and very much a storytelling focus rather than a PowerPoint focus. And then the third one is a link to the full text of that AAM Code of Conduct, which is really, really helpful. And hopefully you can kind of familiarize yourself with to make that feel like it's a tool that's in your pocket to help you hold the reins of your session with confidence. And all of my contact information is here at the bottom. Feel free to get in touch with me. I am not hard to find on the internet. I am the Art Ropeek on social media things, and my email is just ropeek@gmail.com, which is ROPEIK. And that is it for me. I don't know if there's any other last tidbits that you've got, Veronica.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of housekeeping stuff. We've pretty much kept everybody on the phone, and hopefully you can all see my screen at the moment. So just some quick before you goes, we did record today's presentation, and as soon as it downloads to my computer, we will put it up in the Presenter Center by the end of the week. We'll try and get a transcript out as fast as my little hands can type from this. A second reminder that your slides, if you decide to do them, are due May 10th. My contact information is there. Tiffany's is there. You've been interacting with a lot. And don't forget to register by next Friday if you haven't already. Otherwise, you're going to pay $200 more than you would have paid if you just registered today. So that's it. Thanks for joining us today. And thank you, Rachel. And we will see you guys in 38 days.
Thank you all.